So thank you for accepting our invite, Professor GK. Yeah, I'll briefly introduce you. So Professor GK Suraishkumar is a professor in the Department of Biotechnology at IIT Madras. He was earlier a faculty member in the Department of Chemical Engineering at IIT Bombay for around 11 years. He earned his PhD from Drexel University, Philadelphia, and his BTech in Chemical Engineering from IIT Madras in 1986. And in between, he did his master's. His major area of research is reactive species. He is the author of 3 books which are used as reference or textbooks in a number of universities around the world. Further, he has created 5 MOOCs as NPTEL online certification courses. He is also the inventor on 6 granted and 3 under process patents. In addition, the technology developed in his group has successfully been applied at Biocon Industries and has been featured in prestigious technology alerts such as the one by Frost and Sullivan. He has guided several PhD and master's theses. Administratively, he has played pivotal roles in the setup of the departments of biotechnology as the first formal department head, first at IIT Madras and then later at IIT Hyderabad. He was one of the main architects of the first postgraduate program in clinical engineering in India, which is a multi-institute program and the first of its kind in India as well. In addition, he contributed as the head of the Sophisticated Analytical Instruments Facility SAFE. He continues to contribute on national level faculty selection, advisory and institution level committees in the relevant areas. On the more closer to this particular interaction, he is passionate about improving student learning, and he has even published papers in reputed international journals on the methods that he has developed to improve learning. He has received multiple honors throughout his career, and recently last year he has also received the Best Teacher Award from the Biotech department. We welcome you, Professor GK, to this interactive session. And
thank you very much for the kind introduction.
Yeah. So we would like to first understand your philosophy towards teaching and learning. Would you like to elaborate on?
Sure. I like to tell stories, so I will probably start with the story whenever I can. Some cases I cannot, but this one I can. I thought I'll tell you how the philosophy fell into place. I think I realized quite early, sometime in my 8th standard, that I was oriented toward teaching. Essentially, it gave me satisfaction and so on and so forth. Somehow I could feel good about teaching. So I was quite sure that I would end up as a teacher in what I think got decided later. That's pretty much it. So I may not have read much in learning aspects and so on and so forth. That came much later, but I guess I was looking out for various things subconsciously. And in my first year of teaching at IIT Bombay, this was 93, 94, that academic year, I got to read Aurobindo's thoughts on teaching. This was Aurobindo's writings are a little difficult, so I read Mother's writings on Aurobindo's thoughts on teaching. And something that was written there kind of caught my attention. It said the first principle of true teaching is that nothing can be taught. And somehow when I read that, it made so much sense, it was so complete a statement. And that pretty much became my philosophy at an individual level. Throughout, I think I'll make a difference between individual aspects and to a group or to others and so on and so forth. So at the individual levels, when it comes down to the brass tacks and so on and so forth, it is still that. It is nothing can really be taught, and therefore be humble, and at best what you can do is help others learn whatever they are good at and so on and so forth. That thought, I think I presented sometime in 2011 or so when Jeff Freud was visiting. He didn't like it. So he made it very clear during the talk itself. I was asked to give a talk, and he didn't quite like it. And that was the case with most of the people of, let me say, Western within quotes. Uh, People who follow that philosophy will not like it. That's what I found by checking. I casually check once in a while, and they don't like. And then I stopped telling them that. Then I realized that I should probably have something that, applies to a class. This applies very well at an individual level, but what applies to a class? And there, after quite a long time, I came down to this, maybe after about 10 years of teaching or so. Let me present that, that probably would be helpful to others and so on and so forth. Let me present that in a graphical form. It is something like this. If you plot a typical diagram, number of students, typical frequency diagram, number of students versus, let us say, relevant abilities. Relevant abilities, by relevant abilities, I mean the abilities that are kind of specific to that particular course. I typically say that probably I'm somewhere here, and probably somebody is somewhere here in terms of transport, which I teach. And if you ask me to sing, I'm probably somewhere here, and people will run away. That I'm very well aware of, and so I will limit my my scale only to this course and so on and so forth, relevant abilities for this course. Suppose it is something like this, which is true of any class about 20. It's a very nice welcome that turns up. I do give diagnostic tests to form groups and so on and so forth. It always follows this. If it is like this in the beginning of the course, all that I'm trying to do is at the end of the course, it should be like this. Thinner distribution and much further to the higher abilities. So this is my philosophy, if you want to call it that, at the class level. What else can I... Yeah, that I think covers things at the individual level and at the class level. Even at the class level, I would say I look for individuals, if at all I can. If it's a very large class, that becomes a little difficult, yes. But still, if you are oriented towards the individual, then in some way that gets covered. So if you can, what should I say, cater to the needs of individuals in a class, that's the best, in my opinion. Whereas in a class, at least, this is what I am after. I think I should stop presenting, right? Just a second. Stop share.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I wanted to inquire about the second plot, which had the reduced deviation. What is your thought about that part?
What is my thought in the sense?
It's originally, before teaching, it's a larger video.
How would I ensure that? Okay. Again, I would say that at a personal level, it is the facial expressions or the eye expressions of individual students, their body language and so on and so forth. That is my best input. A scan of the class with a focus on picking up that is my best input. Always, for anything that I do in a class. However, that cannot be communicated to others. It's somewhat difficult to communicate also. Even if I try to describe everything in great detail, it may not communicate whatever I'm trying to. So for that, I resort to marks. Let's say I said that I conduct a diagnostic test, which is based on a previous course. When I teach transport, it is based on material energy balances, which everybody is supposed to pick up. It's a very basic course in terms of analysis of biological systems. So I do that in the first week pretty much of classes. And that's essentially for me to give me a basis to form groups for tutorials. And so I compare the distribution at the end of the class to that. I compare the end of the distribution at the end of the course end of the course to that end of the course to previous years distributions, maybe a few years back, and so on and so forth. There are always questions in my mind regarding this. How can I really be sure that it's, the class abilities were the same, the exam abilities were the same, and so on and so forth. All these are very standard questions, but these are acceptable in the literature. So, for acceptability purposes, there are some assumptions that underlie these comparisons. So those assumptions are acceptable in the literature, and therefore, whenever I need to communicate something to journals, or whenever I need to talk about it to others, that's what I use. So there is some number associated with it. It's easier to catch. But that, I think, is only a representation of what it is really in terms of learning. For me, the student reception, which is reflected in their faces, in their eyes mostly, in their faces, and in the body language. That is the most important.
So while we are talking about the students' reception, may I ask you about the methodology that you use to gauge this from the students, and what kind of techniques do you use for effective teaching?
Okay, techniques used for effective teaching. My base is a lecture. Okay, my base is a lecture. I would say the lecture, not a traditional lecture. It's a lecture with emphasis on two-way communication. That is at the back of my mind. Even if I'm lecturing, it is not I say this, and that is kind of insidious to very many teachers. It's whenever you go and stand as a lecturer, that automatically comes in. And you need to work against it to get over it, is what, at least I needed to work against it in the initial parts of my career to consciously get over it. I knew that that's no good. It is how the students learn, or how the students learn, that's the most important. Whatever I say is not really important, right? And so if that is internalized and then you bring it to a lecture, that kind of turns out different. It always looks for a conversation possibility during the lecture itself. So that is the basis. On top of that, all these standard terms. I've kind of tried many of these things and realized that it already exists in the literature. Some of those have been new, but already exists in the literature. It's a very old literature. Learning literature is very, very old. So you go and search, you will find something or the other. And that I realized only when I went to write papers. When I went to write papers, I had to compare and so on and so forth. Otherwise, the reviewers will not keep quiet. So only then did I come to know that these existed probably under different names and things like that. So the simplest thing is problem-based learning, which is essentially posing a problem and then using the solution of that problem to present the principles in the simplest form. There could be other forms of problem-based learning too. Active learning, which gets people to work on things and thereby understand the material, thereby learn the material at a deeper level. A cooperative learning, which again believes that if you get people together who have different abilities, then people will learn from each other, and the level of learning for the entire group goes up. And then something that I did on my own, which I could not find. There are equivalents in the literature, but the specific thing did not exist, which was an exercise to take students to the deepest level of learning, the creative level of learning. There is a semester-long exercise that I give, and I give a good amount of weight for that toward the grade, and then it kind of kicks off and does its job. And very recently, game-based learning, and all these things came as something as possible or as tools to address certain needs. I felt, this is not right in the class in my early days of teaching. How do I do this? Then I either thought about it or went and searched later on. When I became aware of the literature, I went and searched. Then chose to do those things. So all these techniques on top of this conversational lecture came on a need basis. So that's the way that I go about. That's what you can call my methodology of teaching.
Sure. Um, has there been any? I mean, you mentioned about various, in some sense, experiments that you have tried out in your teaching, and you have also found some which are new, some which have some equivalences in the literature.
Yeah.
Have you tried something which has not worked out? Do you have any anecdotes on that?
Yeah. In fact, uh, since it was, I mean, mostly it is need based. So when this need based, there's a lot of focus that goes along with it, and you search for something or you think of something to address that, and mostly it works. I mean, it has worked at least. One thing that has not worked is when I decided to listen to somebody else. So let me tell you that story. This was as soon as I came to IIT Madras, 2004. I joined IIT Madras, and I came in at the level of an administrator. It was kind of understood that I need to take care of the biotechnology department and so on and so forth. All the talks with the director had happened earlier, when I was at IIT Bombay. So I came in, was heavily into administration and so on and so forth. And as an administrator, I know, you get to meet a lot of people. So I got to meet somebody, and the person was interested in teaching. And that was surprising because not many people are interested in teaching. And this person, I think at that time itself or a little later, became a very highly connected person in Indian science. I'll not give you details.
Sure.
So this person, I mean, I was excited about the CFA exercise. I just had a paper out in 2004 on that and so on and so forth. This is the exercise that takes students to the creative learning level. And I was talking about it. The person heard it. He said, it's very good, but you should make it optional to students. This came from a person who had huge experience, set on being a national figure and all that. So I decided to try it. I tried it the next time I taught it. It was an utter disaster. There were 48 or 52 students or something like that in class. I assigned it the same way that I do. Only thing is that I made it optional this time. The other regular exams and things like that were counted towards the grade. And at the end of the course, I think 2 said they would submit, 1 actually submitted. So that's a total disaster. And I went against a lot of student input, even at that time, saying never stop doing this. This is something that we all love, and love in the sense they love the learning that comes out of it. Doing a creative exercise is no fun, but love the learning that comes on it and never stop doing this. These comments have been there right through, and I've been giving this exercise from 1996 onwards, 1996 Jan onwards. So I went against that and did that, and it was an utter disaster. And then I quickly threw it out and then went back to having that as a part of the regular exercise. Now it carries 60% towards the grade.
Wow.
Especially after the pandemic, I can play around with various things in terms of percentages towards the grade. So, because I believe that's the thing that helps people learn. In fact, I tell my students right in the first class or the second class, I don't believe in exams, the formal exams, that is. Evaluations, yeah, certainly that's a part of the system because that gives input. I even tell people that exams don't help learning. It is mainly for others. It is mainly so that we rank you and others use those ranks and so on. So it's in some way, some form, that kind of a thing. That's what I strongly believe. So these exercises which take students to the highest levels of learning and do that in the best possible fashion is what I believe in. The question was whether something did not work, right? Yeah, that experiment did not work.
Nice. So I have a related question or a follow-up question on this, right? So on one side, philosophically, we say that students should be focused on learning and not worry too much about marks. But on the other side, this experiment kind of suggests that whenever we want to inculcate some concepts into the students, or we want them to learn and reach this high level of creativity, then we have to take the avenue of, in some sense, our evaluation or the grading policy. Do you have any thoughts on this paradoxical situation?
Yeah, in a sense it is, but if you consider the fact that we are also responsible for, evaluating the extent of student learning, that is kind of part of the deal, although I don't like it, it's kind of part of the deal. So what I do is, I give a lot of weight to these exercises. I give exams just for the sake of being in the system, because the system believes it, and so on and so forth. I give one exam or something like that. And it also helps me in a certain way to keep the students motivated. For example, tutorials, what I tell them is I form groups in a certain way, and the average of the group average marks will be the tutorial marks for each one of the group. So that way I say, you make sure that everybody learns, and that's 10% towards the grade. So you make sure that everybody learns, and the exam, that one in-semester exam, will be on the lines of the tutorials. And so whatever marks that the group average is, the group average marks will be added to each one in the group as their tutorial marks. So 10% is a good enough incentive. And so for such reasons, yeah, exam is helpful. Because that's our minds, that's a student mindset anyway, or anybody's mindset for that matter. But I don't believe in that for learning. So I kind of use exams, whereas I make sure that learning happens effectively through other things. I'm grading them, by the way. They are being evaluated. Only thing is that they are assigned the exercise right in the beginning of the semester. They submit it towards the end of the semester. I take my time to grade them. If this is worthwhile, I take good 10 days plus to grade them actually. And I sit in front of the computer and grade them, because it is creative. I go check every single thing. If I have doubts, I talk to them and so on. So I take my time grading. And it's worthwhile like that.
Sure.
So the question was, how do you what shall I say, rationalize between these two aspects? If you're grading things that were designed to improve learning, it's fine. So the grade reflects the level. Yeah, I always put in my introductory sheet that if the grade reflects the learning level, it is best. So I make sure of that. Make sure that the grade reflects the learning level. So win-win for both.
I have a curiosity question on, you said that you form groups in a certain way. Yeah. I would like to understand what that certain way is.
Okay. Earlier when I started this way of forming groups, I've been doing it for very long. At that point in time, the marks were not considered personal. So the class rep, I could easily get to the marks one, and the class rep can be given the marks, and there's no problem. Of course, you don't share the marks with each other, but if the class rep is given, then it's fine. Then one of the earliest ways that I did it was the group average CGPA must be plus or minus 0.25 of the class average CGPA. So that way it makes sure that you have, each group has people with a distribution, and so that people can teach others and thereby learn better. People who are not so, whose skills are not so high can learn from others, and so on and so forth. And then slowly that became difficult because marks were personal. We could no longer display marks and so on and so forth. And therefore I went into this diagnostic test mode. I give a diagnostic test it's a tough test. It is meant to differentiate people. I tell them that this will be a tough test, but your regular exam will not be as tough as this. I tell them right away. And so I give them an exam, and then I just arrange them in descending order. And what I do is I arrange them in descending order. Suppose there are 4 students in a group, I form 4 sets. And then the only criterion to form groups is every group has to have one from each set. I display these sets, and of course, set 1 is probably somewhere in the middle marks and so on. So it's not very obvious where, but students can figure out. That's okay. That's fine. But the criterion is that the criterion is that each group should have one from each set, and that way the groups are kind of reflective of the distribution in class, and thereby learning happens better, I think. And that gets reflected in the learnings as seen by comparisons also. So that way it is fine.
Yeah, this seems to be a very interesting way of doing peer learning or ensuring that the peer learning is happening.
And
Which
the
is
groups are
also
formed by
quite.
them. I don't form the groups.
I see. Yes.
They can work with their friends and all that. In fact, I
Yes.
in fact suggest that you work with your friends. That way your understanding is a little better and so on and so forth. Just make sure that the criterion is thing, and then I tell them, if at all I find some hanky-panky, the class representative should send me the groups. So the class representative is responsible at the first level to ensure that no hanky-panky has happened. Then I tell them, if I find any hanky-panky, I'll go and disband all groups, I'll form the groups. And I've never needed to do that. I do check, but I've never needed to do that. Students are fine.
Yes.
Once you give them the basis and so on and so forth, and they see value in the basis, they will follow. That's
Right. So that's very good. Since we are talking about this different sets of groups, I also have this related question that uh, have you felt that the diversity has increased over the years in the class, and whether teachers should be doing anything specific to address this diversity?
okay. By diversity, let me answer it in again 2 ways, but of a different kind this time. Of course, in any set of students, let us say, there is a distribution in learning abilities. Therefore, there is diversity from that point of view. Nowadays, there is diversity in terms of backgrounds, in terms of nationalities, and so on and so forth. So, in terms of abilities, I've done a lot of work. After I finished my term as the head of biotech, suddenly there seemed to be time and you want to do things that you've been thinking of and so on and so forth. So I started getting into aspects of how do I address the people to the left of the distribution. Most of us, most of the faculty members have been good students. Okay, that's probably why they became faculty members, given our very strict selection procedures and all that. So what happens is we are usually unaware of the people who are on the left of the distribution, even our own classmates. We kind of ignore. We tacitly ignore them. And that started bothering me from quite early. Within 3 or 4 years of teaching, that somehow was eating me inside. I'll have to do something about this. I'll have to do something about this. So then I kind of formulated myself a problem that how do I come up with methods of improving the learning of people towards the left of the distribution? It took me 9 years. And then whatever I found, the strategies I found in terms of experiments and so on and so forth, by talking to a lot of people in a non-threatening setting, on the corridors, in the parking lot, and so on and so forth. That's how I got input from people who were to the left of the distribution, because you cannot point them out in class. And one of the biggest principles I learned is that never point out to them in class. Never, ever. And that actually spoils the whatever little learning that happens and so on. And after 9 years, I had something to contribute. There is actually a paper, if I can just show you that, and I'll probably say something about it. Let me just see.
Sure.
I need to probably stop it. Okay, this is a paper in the European Journal of Engineering Education. The title is Strategies to Improve Learning of All Students in a Class. Okay. And very to give you an idea of what it is, let me just read the abstract so that it will be obvious, and then I'll probably summarize a few points. The statistical distribution of the student learning abilities in a typical undergraduate engineering class poses a significant challenge to simultaneously improve the learning of all students in the class. With traditional instruction styles, the students with significantly high learning abilities are not satisfied due to a feeling of unfulfilled potential, and the students with significantly low learning abilities feel lost. To address the challenge in an undergraduate core or required course on transport phenomena and biological systems, a combination of learning strategies such as active learning, including cooperative group learning, challenge exercises, and others were employed in a pro-advising context. Okay, all these terms I picked up after I did the work, when I had to write the paper. I'll tell you a story on that also right after this. The short-term and long-term impacts were evaluated through student course performances and input, respectively. The results show that it is possible to effectively address the challenge posed by the distribution of student learning abilities in a class. Did the work, I wrote up the paper, I sent it to a journal. My previous paper I published sometime in 2006, I think, 2004, in chemical engineering education. And then I sent it there, and things had changed. They wanted backing with theories, backing with this thing. They essentially wanted evidence-based things, the same way that we do in science or our domain research, that had kind of completely taken over the education thing also. My first paper, I could kind of get away with comparing in words. Of course, I had to compare and so on and so forth, give evidence, but the evidence need not have been linked to theories. So it got rejected there, and then I sent it to this journal. This editor was very nice. The person said, you do this, this, and this. I guess he realized the value of the work. So he said, do this, this, and this. And then I realized, this is what needs to be done nowadays. I need to go and find theories. I need to link it to theories. So when I went and searched for theories, the work fitted 5 different theories. So I kind of intertwined those theories, wrote it, sent it, got accepted. So that was the story behind that. If you look at the strategies, it is a combination of learning strategies, that is active learning, including cooperative group learning, challenge exercises, and others. So the active learning, cooperative group learning, appropriately done, helps the people on the left of the distribution. The challenge exercises fulfills the yearnings of the people on the right of the distribution. And that put together, that's what I thought. And then the data told me, and the data is important, data told me that people with a D and a C actually were benefited by the challenge exercise, by the CFA.
Oh, yes.
I was very surprised. They were, they were all gaga about it. I got comments. There were about 150 responses, something like that were there. I'm not too sure of the number now. And I was quite surprised to see this response from people with a C or a D or even lower. And so it helps. It helps in very many different ways of doing. And I think being aware and being sensitive to the distribution in abilities is a must. In terms of various backgrounds, of course, the nationality differences are obvious. Some other things might come to light in terms of the rural background and urban background and so on and so forth. So I try to address that, I try to treat every student the same. There are biases that creep in without us knowing. If you observe us interacting with students, I try not to let those come to the forefront. I try to curb them and put in extra effort to probably address appropriately. For example, if there's a foreign student and so on and so forth, with a different background in terms of not exactly biological engineering, but something else, then you ask the person, are you getting this because your background is different? So it shows that we are sensitive to the needs of that person. So that's what I mean. Even in a class, if you can focus on individual needs, that's great. And that, if you can take it without the student realizing it, That is very important. The students should not realize that they're being singled out. That can be disastrous. So without that, if we can address and induce a feeling of togetherness, or the person is fair to everybody kind of a thing, I think it works very well.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah, this paper, if people are interested, would give all the details about the different, how to address the different abilities in class. I just told you a couple. It's not
Yeah,
comprehensive.
definitely. In fact, there seem to be a large set of papers that you have written in various journals, and I'm sure that the audience will find it very interesting to go through them.
Yeah, 4 or 5, I think, not many, but yeah, but each one is, again, I don't believe in writing papers for numbers' sake. I've never believed in numbers, either for domain research or this thing. Whenever I had something to contribute, I wrote, and all of these are single author papers, except for the one about the lab courses I've written. And because Karthik and I, he was my mentor at IIT Bombay, God bless his soul, he passed away, unfortunately. The amount of freedom that he gave me, I was very young at that time, the amount of freedom that he gave me to, run the course the way I wanted. He was a senior person, but he allowed me to run the lab entirely the way I wanted it right the first time. Because I've again felt that the labs are not being properly run. I'm an experimentalist. So I kind of had that feeling that experiments were not being given their right. So I designed the lab to get that across appropriately, to improve the thought associated with labs and so on.
Sure. Yeah, one probably final question from my side, and then we'll open up for discussion. Do you have any message towards the future teachers in terms of improving their skills, or any note from your side?
Again, let me give that in 2 parts. Sure. One is, how should I say this? Some of us have a passion towards learning, teaching. I mean, it's actually student learning. I'd like to address them separately. And then there are many. It's all, again, a distribution. Teaching ability is always, in a population, any skill is a distribution. So this is also a skill. So some of us could have the passion and skill towards the right, and the others would be in the middle. So let me address these two aspects, these two backgrounds a little differently. If one has an orientation and a passion, I would say just be yourself, explore, and good to be aware of the terminology and so on and so forth in the field, so that you can communicate something worthwhile that you have found and things like that. By just keep in touch with the literature, whatever little you can. And most importantly, don't worry about recognitions by others, because that will not come. Recognition is something that others give you, I believe. And if it is popular, that is when recognitions happen. It has to be popular in a certain way, in some esoteric way even. It has to be popular for recognition to happen. Whereas if you're working on things that are absolutely new, that will not happen. So don't even bother about it. Just keep doing your thing. This is for people with passion and orientation and so on and so forth. If you're doing it as a part of a job, I would suggest that please pick up some learning principles. Please realize that teaching is a totally different ballgame. If you're good in research, it does not automatically follow that you're a good teacher. Sometimes they match, but not always. So it is good to realize that the learning literature is so old, so extensive. There's so much already done. People have done a lot of work. There are evidence-based techniques that work, which means that they will work all the time. As long as you apply that, it's going to work. That's the guarantee that comes with a published technique, let us say. So pick up some of those, or pick up the basic things in learning, either through the TLC FTP, or we have, in collaboration with TLC, Prasad, Richa, and I have a 10-hour MOOC or NOC, NPTEL online certification course on effective engineering teaching and practice. It has an engineering orientation, slant, yes, but you could do that. So this would give you some basis. And then you don't have to use all techniques altogether. Try one technique at a time, apart from the base that you have, and you'll see that it works. And choose the ones that vibe with you. Choose the techniques that vibe with you. And that will improve your effectiveness significantly. And most importantly, don't take yourselves too seriously. That I think is the most important thing. There is always this thing about I am the teacher. That is there at the back of all our minds. And that I think spoils out. Once we get past that even a little bit and get into the middle of, I'm a facilitator of learning, the entire attitude changes. No complaints about students will arise. Okay, no bitching about students will arise and so on and so forth. You're always finding students are students as they are. And once they realize that you're doing these things, it's a two-way communication. So that's my suggestion to people who are doing it as a part of the job.
Sure. Thanks a lot for your words. So we'll open it up for discussion. We have Prasad, Rahul. You have any questions for Professor GK?
Hi, I am Rahul actually. Yeah, so it's actually I find it's challenging in two ways. One is that teaching in a very diverse class, particularly UG class. I taught in Allahabad also. I not taught UG class here, but I taught earlier in Allahabad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so but I am teaching here in a master's course, so I'm finding it a little more challenging when the people from the diverse, like say, the course which coming from the computer science, then other different department, right? So they don't have enough background on initially the basic required for that. Okay, and setting them a basic required sometimes it takes a lot of classes, but but that is one challenge I found, and then other challenge I found in this teaching is little more. The question I have here is this: how do we overcome that with the least minimum of effort in the class, going into the lot of basic stuff during the classes?
Was the question complete or is there some other?
So that's the one kind of complete the question. It's completed.
Okay, let us talk about that first and then we can take up the other question. Luckily, I have some experience in this because I'm doing bio, I'm a chemical engineer. And we have had courses, especially UOP courses, where there were medical doctors without any engineering background. And they needed to pick up biological engineering principles. They have not done math. But luckily, many doctors who take this route are not afraid of math. If they're afraid of math, it's a bigger challenge. Let us at least talk about the people who are not afraid of math. So they can put in the effort even at that stage and then pick it up and so on and so forth. That's not a problem. So what I did was for this particular course of biological engineering principles to the people with different backgrounds, I gave some biology to people who did not have biology, some basic engineers. They were not biological engineers. So biological engineers did not need that. And even if they are there, I'll tell them, please bear with me for these 4 or 5 classes. It might be a repeat. And then again, I present it in a way which is a little more comprehensive from the way that they've picked up in their undergraduate classes and so on and so forth. So there is some reinforcement of learning, greater insights into the material that they've learned and things like that, even for people with the same background. But it won't appear so. It won't appear as though it is at a different level to people who are taking it for the first time, because I start with the very first principles. It takes some bit of doing to do that, but you can do that. It's only a way of looking at the subject. Subject is essentially the same. It's only a way of looking at the subject. So a part of the course initial part of the course needs to be set aside for balancing the backgrounds, if at all I can put it that way. And then you take off. If you put an effort into looking at the syllabus, even if it is the entire syllabus for that course, how would I present it in terms of overarching principles and then give these as examples? There are always some overarching principles. There are very few overarching principles on which all of these rest. These are all details. So if you start looking at principles and details, you can reorganize the course so that you cover the same material or even more. Okay, many times they cover a lot more. Same material in much lesser number of classes. The students understand it a lot better because it's presented in a simpler fashion, right from the basics. Whenever you present it from the basics, it's always much simpler to communicate and so on and so forth. And therefore, with an background balancing first part, and then what should I say? The main part with a better, let us say, organization. Just for organization in terms, it takes a lot of doing there. It takes a lot of preparation doing that. Once you do that, then it gets across. For example, I have presented the entire material that we do in bioreactors course, a 40-hour material, in 10 hours. Just because I started looking at it that way. I mean, it's my area. It was easy for me to do. So that could be tried to address this difference in backgrounds.
Okay, that's what my main concern was. How do we basically the organization of that becomes a little more
We can talk about it. I'm not in the field, but I can probably tell you how I did my course so that we can meet and talk about it also.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of doing. It takes a lot of doing to start seeing things in a more comprehensive way in terms of overarching principles and examples, which was not the way we did the courses. We did the courses as the way somebody wrote a textbook or whatever. And probably there are better ways of writing the textbook.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I've written 3 textbooks, so I know.
Yeah, Prasad, you had a question?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not a question, but I thought you really enjoyed the interaction. A lot of things what GK said is along the lines TLC, all this active cooperative learning, formative assessment. So I'm talking about a context not in classroom, but connected with the teaching learning.
Yeah.
I mean, this I face when I go for this faculty development program in many places. We meet passionate teachers.
Yes.
So the problem, I mean, passion is good. Passion is the one that probably we need to start with. But I see sometimes passion blocks further learning, especially in this faculty development. So they have this very deep-rooted, belief system, or I don't know what to call. This is the way teaching should be done, and they're very passionate, very good teachers.
Yeah.
When we say something about these reason-based things, peer learning, these things actually helps. I see, they will agree, but there is an inner resistance.
They won't implement it later.
Right. So what tips, what thoughts you have to circumvent this or how to approach this?
Okay. That's a tough one, because these people are set in their minds and they've been effective. So they don't see something different. They've been effective in their own ways. The trick lies in showing them without telling them, or the trick lies in making it suggestive rather than prescriptive. Our tone of presenting and our way of presenting makes a big difference in these things. It's essentially people management. It comes down to people management. So when it comes to people management, we learn that never say, this should be done. Then it's gone. A good leader would kind of take inputs from everybody and then but not lose sight of what needs to be done, and kind of takes people along so that it gets done. So I would use more of people management strategies to slowly, what shall I say, promote these methods and tell them that there is enough evidence there, and if there is evidence, it is definitely going to work. Why don't you try it out and see whether it works, and so on and so forth, rather than saying you should try it, kind of a thing. That is what my suggestion is. Whether it's going to work or not, we'll have to see. This, and usually when it is people related, you kind of break through and make them a part of the team and so on and so forth. It usually works. unless somebody has an axe to grind. If they have an axe to
Yeah,
grind,
exactly. No, I mean, one strategy, as we said, we try to make them experience the group learning in the process, so that some of them get
and then
done.
tell them, this is group learning essentially. Now that you are brainstorming, give them an exercise which involves something which is different from whatever they know, and show that group learning works. It'll work. It'll definitely work. So then you see, this is group learning. It was much better, and you enjoyed the process. So and when somebody enjoys the process, the learning is always better.
Thank you, GK.
Oh, you're very welcome. Nice to interact here. Definitely.
Okay, thanks, Prasad. Alright, so we come to the end of this session. Thanks a lot, Professor GK, for sharing your views and spending time with us. And
Thank you for having me here. It was really a pleasure, and it's always a pleasure to talk about the learning process.
Yeah, I'm sure that your message will definitely be helpful for all of us to improve our teaching and learning skills. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye then.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye, people.